Hey, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Deal. The rooftop bar in New York dazzled with lights, like an artificial starry sky amidst the heart of the city. Late at night, the crisp autumn air slipped through gusts of wind blowing from the Hudson River, rustling the wine glasses on the tables and the tousled reddish-brown hair of Lila Carter. She stood at the corner of the bar, twirling an empty glass in her hand, her eyes scanning the crowd of elites dressed in expensive suits and evening gowns. At 27, Lila was a freelance photographer with a bank account teetering on empty and a heart long closed off. The pale green dress she wore, bought for $15 at a thrift store, stood out awkwardly amid the sea of designer labels. But Lila didn't care. She was here to network, hoping to land a photography gig that could cover this month's rent. She pulled a small photo from her purse, a shot she'd taken in the park last week, now scribbled with a few haphazard pen marks. It was her strange habit, doodling on photos when she felt stressed. Those meaningless lines helped calm her, though at this moment they offered little relief. The crowd chattered noisily, jazz music drifting from the live band. But Lila felt like an outsider, until a sharp, cold voice sliced through the air. "I don't need you anymore, Vanessa. It's over." A tall man dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit emerged from a shadowed corner near the railing. His gray eyes flashed under the lights, sharp and full of anger. Facing him was a blonde woman in a tight red silk dress, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Oliver, don't do this," she sobbed. But he turned away, striding toward the bar, leaving her to bury her face in her hands and cry. Lila frowned, watching curiously. The drama of the upper crust wasn't her concern, but the scene was theatrical enough to distract her from the hunger gnawing at her stomach. She was about to look away when the man, Oliver she assumed, headed straight toward her. He stopped, his breathing rapid, his gaze sweeping over her as if sizing her up. "Are you the one they sent?" he asked, his voice deep but firm. Lila blinked, her fingers pausing on the photo. "Sent? You've got the wrong person. I'm just—" "No time to explain," he cut her off, rubbing his temple as if suppressing a headache. "I'm Oliver Blackwood. I need you tonight. $50,000 one night. Yes or no?" His name rang like a bell in Lila's mind. Oliver Blackwood, the infamous tech billionaire who'd built a software empire from scratch, known for ruthless business deals and a fiercely private life. She'd read about him in Forbes, but seeing him in person was different. He was taller than she'd imagined, broad-shouldered, with an angular face, and gray eyes as deep as a stormy sea. But right now, he didn't look invincible. He seemed flustered, almost desperate. $50,000 for what? Lila asked, her tone laced with suspicion, but unable to hide her curiosity. "To pretend to be my girlfriend," Oliver replied, his eyes flicking toward the blonde woman. Vanessa, no doubt, now being consoled by someone else. "I need to avoid trouble with her and satisfy some investors at a gala. Just one night. Can you do it?" Lila's jaw dropped. Then she let out a dry laugh. "Are you serious? I'm not an actress." But in her mind, the number $50,000 danced wildly. Rent, bills, new camera gear, all solvable in a single night. She studied Oliver, trying to gauge if he was joking, but his gaze was steady, though a faint tremble at the corner of his mouth betrayed his tension. "I'm not kidding," he said, pulling out his phone, fingers swiping quickly. "I'll transfer $25,000 now, the rest after it's done. Decide." Lila bit her lip, her hand unconsciously crumpling the photo. This was insane, but she was too broke to say no. "Fine," she sighed, "but if you try anything weird, I'm out of there." Oliver nodded, a faint smile flickering across his face. "Nothing weird. Just come with me, smile a few times, and act like we've known each other for a while." He typed something, and seconds later, Lila's phone pinged, a notification of a transfer from an anonymous account. She checked it, her eyes widening. $25,000 sat neatly in her balance. "Let's go," Oliver said, turning toward the exit. Lila hastily stuffed the photo back into her bag and followed, her old shoes clacking on the wooden floor. They stepped outside, the cold air hitting her like a slap, making her shiver. Oliver led her to a sleek black car parked nearby, opening the door for her as if it were routine. Lila climbed in, her heart pounding, still unable to believe what she just agreed to. As the car rolled forward, Oliver leaned toward her, so close she caught the scent of his woody cologne, luxurious and warm. "Listen carefully," he whispered, his breath brushing her ear. "Tonight, you're Lila, my girlfriend of 3 months. We met at a photo exhibition. Don't say anything extra. Just follow my lead." Lila stiffened, not just from the sudden closeness, but from a strange sensation. Through the thin fabric of his suit, his heartbeat seemed uneven, fast and slow, like a melody out of tune. She glanced up, meeting his intense gray eyes, and for a moment she felt a jolt. Attraction or unease, she couldn't tell. "Got it," she replied, her voice slightly hoarse, pushing the feeling aside. This was just a role, she told herself. Nothing real. Oliver nodded, pulling back, but his gaze lingered on her for a few seconds before he turned to look out the window. The car sped into the night, heading toward the gala, and Lila sat there clutching her bag, wondering if she'd just stepped into a quick cash grab or a tangle of trouble she couldn't foresee. Chapter 2. The Fake Romance Begins. The ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria gleamed like a crystal palace, its high chandeliers sparkling like a shower of stars, illuminating the perfectly tailored suits and elegant evening gowns. The clinking of champagne glasses mingled with the sophisticated laughter of New York's elite. Lila Carter stepped in beside Oliver Blackwood, her arm lightly resting on his as if they'd been familiar for ages. But inside, her mind was a whirlwind. Tense, excited, and tinged with something she didn't dare name. Her pale green dress, a cheap thrift store find, now felt like flimsy armor amid the forest of luxury. Oliver guided her through the crowd, his gray eyes darting quickly, controlling everything like a general on a battlefield. "Remember," he whispered as they approached a group of investors, "smile a lot. Don't say anything unnecessary." Lila shot him a glance, flashing a smirk. "I'm not an idiot, Blackwood. I know how to handle myself." Her tone was sharp, but inwardly she was calculating every move. This wasn't just about the $50,000. It was a chance to prove she could play this game well. The investors, 3 middle-aged men in gray suits and a silver-haired woman with eyes as sharp as a blade, turned as Oliver introduced her. "This is Lila, my girlfriend," he said, his voice even but confident. Lila stepped forward without needing a nudge, shaking each hand firmly with a radiant smile. "So nice to meet you all," she said, her voice warm yet laced with a hint of mischief. "Oliver's told me about the new project. Sounds like it's going to shake up the tech world, doesn't it?" One man, introducing himself as Charles, laughed heartily. "You're quite knowledgeable. Oliver picked a good one." Lila shrugged, casting a teasing glance at Oliver. "I just try not to embarrass him." The group burst into laughter, and Oliver, though maintaining his calm demeanor, let a faint smile tug at his lips. A small reaction, but enough for Lila to know he approved. She was smart, quick, and adaptable, skills that had kept her afloat through tough times, now shining at full force. Yet deep inside, a strange wave of emotion stirred, pride in her performance, and a flicker of unease as she caught Oliver's gaze, lingering on her longer than necessary. The evening unfolded like a perfectly staged play. Lila navigated the investors' curious questions with ease, turning every moment into an opportunity for Oliver to shine. When Charles asked how they met, she answered without hesitation. "At a photo exhibition, I was showing some of my work and he just, kept standing there staring at me." She winked at Oliver and he picked up smoothly. "I couldn't take my eyes off her." His words were light, but his voice dipped low, almost real. Lila felt her heart skip a beat, then quickly brushed it off. "Don't be stupid, Lila. This is fake," she told herself, her hand unconsciously brushing the bag where her scribbled photo lay tucked away. But then Vanessa Reed appeared, like a cold gust sweeping through the warm room. She strode in, her red silk dress clinging to her perfect figure, her golden blonde hair gleaming like sunlight. Her blue eyes locked onto Lila, brimming with malice. "Oliver," Vanessa said, her voice sweet but cutting like a knife. "Won't you introduce me to your new girlfriend?" Oliver tightened his grip on Lila's arm, his tone icy. Vanessa, this is Lila. Lila, Vanessa, an old acquaintance. Lila shook Vanessa's hand, feeling the cold, tight squeeze and a piercing stare that seemed to bore through her. Pleased to meet you, Lila said, keeping her smile professional, but her mind snapped into high alert. Vanessa tilted her head, her lips curling into a mocking smile. I'm sure he hasn't told you everything about himself, she whispered, close enough for only Lila to hear. He'll break you too, like he did me. But this time, it'll be worse. Her words stabbed into Lila's chest like a needle. She glanced at Oliver, but he merely shrugged, his voice calm. Ignore her. Vanessa loves to dramatize everything. Lila nodded, but a seed of doubt sprouted within her. What did Vanessa know about Oliver that she didn't? And why did she warn her with that mix of jealousy and smugness? Lila shoved the feeling down, focusing on her role, but the sentimental side of her began to stir, a part that wanted to trust Oliver and a part that feared being deceived. The night wore on, and the most tense moment arrived when the band struck up a slow tune. Oliver extended his hand, his voice soft. Dance with me, they're watching. Lila took a deep breath, placing her hand in his, letting him lead her to the floor. He pulled her close, his right hand firm on her waist, his left clasping hers as if afraid she'd slip away. They glided across the floor, their steps syncing oddly well, and Lila caught the scent of his woody cologne. Warm, enticing, yet disorienting. You're good at this, Oliver murmured, his breath brushing her hair, so close she felt a shiver run down her spine. Too good. Lila looked up, meeting his gray eyes. For a fleeting moment, she glimpsed a hint of vulnerability, a deep sadness, before he masked it with his usual faint smirk. I'm a quick learner, she replied, forcing confidence into her voice, but her heart pounded. Was he flirting or testing her? Or did he feel something too? She wanted to ask, to dig deeper, but reason held her back. This is a job, Lila. Don't let feelings mess it up. Yet when the dance ended, Oliver didn't let go right away. His hand stayed on her waist, tightening slightly, his gaze fixed on her as if he wanted to say something. Lila felt her chest constrict, not from fear, but from an emotion she couldn't rein in. She stepped back, forcing a laugh. That should convince them, right? Oliver nodded, but his eyes didn't leave her, as if he too were wrestling with himself. The night ended with Oliver driving her home. The sleek black car glided through the brightly lit streets, and Lila sat silently, clutching her bag, her mind spinning. She'd performed flawlessly, charming the investors, handling Vanessa, and surviving the dance that set her heart racing. But she couldn't deny it. Something between her and Oliver had slipped beyond the script. When the car stopped in front of her rundown apartment, a weathered building with peeling paint and creaky stairs, Oliver turned off the engine, hesitating. He faced her, his gray eyes dim in the faint streetlight. Thank you, he said, his voice lower than usual. You did better than I expected. Lila shrugged, trying to play it cool. I told you, I can handle it. But then he went on, his tone uncharacteristically tentative. This might not be a one-time thing. I'll call you. Lila froze, staring at him, her heart thumping. She wanted to ask why, to know if he truly needed her, or if this was just another game. But she only nodded, opened the door, and stepped out, keeping her voice steady. Call if you need me. I don't say no to money. Oliver didn't reply, just watched as she climbed the steps, her figure fading into the shadows. Lila shut her apartment door, leaning against it, her trembling hand pulling the scribbled photo from her bag. She added a stroke, a meaningless curve, but Oliver's image wouldn't leave her mind. His gray eyes, his hand on her waist, his final words. She was rattled, thrilled by the money, wary of Vanessa, and drawn to a man she shouldn't care about. She whispered to herself, just one night, Lila. Don't dream. But deep inside, her tender, sentimental heart had begun to beat its first unsteady rhythm, a feeling she couldn't extinguish. Chapter 3. The Deal Deepens. 3 days after the gala, Lila sat in her small studio, a cluttered room filled with photographs, an old printer humming noisily, and dusty film strips scattered about, when her phone buzzed. A curt message from an unknown number. Meet me at 7 p.m., Le Bernardin. Oliver Lila stared at the screen, her hand pausing mid-scribble on the corner of a freshly printed photo, a shot of the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset. She frowned, her finger hovering over the delete button, but then stopped. The $50,000 from the last job still sat in her account, enough to live comfortably for a few months, but not enough to quell her curiosity about Oliver Blackwood. What does he want now? She muttered, then stood, deciding to meet him, not for the money but because she needed answers. Le Bernardin was a different world, elegant with pristine white tablecloths, soft light from hanging fixtures, and the faint scent of premium seafood wafting through the air. Lila stepped inside, still in her faded pale green dress, feeling like a fish out of water among sharks. Oliver was already waiting at a corner table, his black suit hugging his frame, gray eyes glinting under the lights. He rose as she approached, pulling out her chair with effortless courtesy. "You came," he said, his deep voice tinged with a hint of satisfaction. "Did you think I'd say no?" Lila replied, sitting down, her arms crossing as if building an invisible wall. "Get to it. What's this about?" Oliver didn't beat around the bush. He slid a glass of red wine toward her and cut straight to the point. $200,000, 3 months. Be my girlfriend, publicly and long-term. I need a stable image to close a major merger." Lila nearly dropped the glass. She gaped at him, then let out a dry laugh, a reflex to mask her shock. 200,000? Are you kidding? I'm not some item you can rent long-term, Blackwood. But in her mind, the figure danced wildly, enough to fund the photo exhibition she'd dreamed of since her mother's death. Oliver leaned forward, his gaze serious. "It's not a rental, it's a partnership. You're good at this, Lila. Better than I expected. And I need you." Lila bit her lip, her hand unconsciously tracing a scribble on the paper napkin. She was smart enough to sense he was dodging something. "Why me? You could hire anyone. Models, actresses, whoever. Why me?" Oliver hesitated, the first time she'd seen his usual confidence waver. "Because you're real," he said, his voice softening. "You don't fake it. I need that." Lila met his eyes, her heart racing, but she quickly regained her composure. "Fine," she said, her tone firm, "but I want a clear contract, and don't expect me to actually fall for you." Oliver nodded, a faint smile flickering. No one's expecting that. They slipped into a strange routine over the following weeks. By day, Lila took photos, edited, lived her own life. But as the sun set, she became Oliver's girlfriend, attending events, posing hand-in-hand for paparazzi, smiling brightly as if they were truly a couple. The public ate it up. Billionaire Oliver Blackwood finally finds love. Headlines blared. Lila found it amusing, but each time she stood beside Oliver, a confusing current ran through her, comfort mixed with unease. The private dinners were where the lines began to blur. One night at Oliver's penthouse, a vast space with floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking New York's skyline, he asked her to stay after a public photo shoot. "No need to rush home," he said, pouring wine into her glass. Lila shrugged, settling onto the soft leather sofa, holding the glass. "Why not? I don't like sleeping over at strangers' places." Oliver chuckled softly, the first time she'd seen him relax. "I'm not a stranger anymore, am I?" They started talking, not about work, but about real things. Oliver spoke of his childhood in an orphanage, his voice low as he recalled nights sleeping on cold floors, no one waiting for him. "I learned not to trust anyone," he said, his eyes distant. Lila felt her chest tighten. She knew that feeling, though in a different way. She told him about her mother, who'd sold paintings to raise her, who died of cancer when Lila was 19. "She taught me photography," she said, her voice catching. "I want to hold an exhibition to make her proud." Oliver looked at her, his gaze unusually gentle. "You'll do it," he said, and for the first time, she felt he genuinely cared. She pulled a photo from her bag, one of her mother now covered in scribbles, and handed it to him. Oliver took it, his fingers brushing the doodles. "When do you do this?" he asked. "When I'm stressed," she replied, forcing a smile. "It helps me think straight." He leaned closer, his breath grazing her shoulder as he adjusted the photo on the table. "I like it," he said, his voice warm and low. Lila froze, feeling that closeness, not just physical, but something deeper. She caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, and a question nagged at her. Is this still fake? But Vanessa Reed wouldn't let things stay peaceful. One afternoon, as Lila worked in her studio, Vanessa appeared, holding a thick envelope. "Think you're special?" she asked, her voice sweet but dripping with venom. She tossed the envelope onto the table. Inside were photos of Oliver with other women from years past. "He's hired people like you before," Vanessa said, her eyes flashing. "And I know a secret he's hiding from you. His health isn't good. If you're not careful, he'll drag you down with him." Lila stared at the photos, her hands trembling, but she quickly steadied herself. "Jealous?" she asked, her voice icy. "I don't care what he did before. I'm just doing my job." Vanessa smirked. "Keep going, but when he falls apart, don't cry to me." She left, leaving Lila with a pile of doubts. That night at the penthouse, Lila confronted Oliver. "Vanessa said you've hired others before," she said, her tone hard. "And she hinted at something. Your health. What's the truth?" Oliver sighed, setting his wineglass down. "I've hired people, yes," he admitted, "but none like you. As for the rest, Vanessa just wants to ruin me. Don't believe her." Lila studied him, wanting to trust him, but her sentimental side flared. She feared being deceived, feared hurting like she had when she lost her mom. "I don't like being kept in the dark," she said, then walked out, her heart a tangled mess. The turning point came at a charity event a few days later. An investor, a fat man with a sleazy grin, mocked Lila in front of the crowd. "This girl must be Blackwood's new trinket, huh? How much to rent her?" Lila smirked, ready to fire back, but Oliver stepped forward, his voice like ice. "Say that again, and I'll make sure your company's bankrupt in a week." The man shut up, and the crowd buzzed. Later, on a quiet balcony, Oliver pulled Lila outside, the cool air making her shiver. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek, his breath so close she could smell the coffee he'd just drunk. "You're not like the others," he whispered, his eyes locked on hers. Lila's heart raced, longing to believe him, but fear clung to her. "Don't say that if you don't mean it," she said, her voice trembling. Oliver didn't reply, just held her gaze, and in that moment, the line between fake and real blurred more than ever. Chapter 4. The Sacrifice Revealed. Everything began to shift quietly, like dark clouds gathering before a storm that no one noticed. Lila sat in her studio, her hand tracing scribbled lines onto a photo she'd taken of Oliver at the charity event. His deep eyes in the image held a faint smile that warmed her heart every time she looked at it. 2 months had passed since the $200,000 deal, and she'd started to embrace her feelings, if only in silence. The private dinners, the lingering touches, Oliver's gentle words, all of it made her believe that, though it began as a sham, something real was sprouting between them. But then, he changed. The first canceled message came on a rainy afternoon. "Can't meet tonight. Busy," Oliver wrote, so curt that Lila had to read it twice to confirm it was him. She shrugged, telling herself he was a billionaire. Being busy was normal. But then the cancellations rolled in like waves. Meeting. Need rest. No explanations. No apologies. When she texted back asking if he was okay, his reply was a single word. Yes. One word, like a slap to her patience. Lila tried to stay calm, but her sharp mind wouldn't let her ignore it. She grabbed her phone and called him. It rang 3 times before Oliver picked up, his voice distant. "What is it, Lila?" "What's wrong with you?" she asked, irritation seeping into her tone. "Canceling constantly, replying like a robot. If you don't want me as your girlfriend anymore, just say it." Silence stretched on the other end. Then he said, "I'm busy. That's all." Lila caught a faint, weary sigh before he hung up, leaving her no chance to press further. The next evening, at Oliver's penthouse, she decided to confront him face to face. He opened the door, still in his black suit, but his gray eyes were clouded, as if veiled by fog. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice flat, not inviting her in. Lila pushed past him, ignoring the resistance in his gaze. "I'm here to get answers," she said, arms crossed, standing in the vast room with floor-to-ceiling glass. "You're avoiding me. Why?" Oliver turned away, walking to the bar, pouring a drink but not sipping it. "There's nothing to ask," he said, his voice even. Lila stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder to turn him around. But he brushed her off, the motion swift and sharp. "Don't touch me," he snapped, the first time she'd seen him lose his composure. Lila froze, her hand hanging in midair, as if scalded. "If you're tired of me, just say it," she shouted, her voice breaking with hurt. "Don't play this distant game. I can't take it." Oliver faced her, a flicker of pain flashing in his eyes before he hit it. "You don't get it, Lila," he said, his voice hardening. "This was never real. You knew that from the start." His words cut into her like a knife. Lila felt her chest tighten, tears welling up, but she bit her lip, holding them back. She was smart enough to see he was lying. His eyes, the way his hand trembled as he set the glass down, all betrayed his words. "You're an ass," she whispered, her voice choked. "I don't deserve this." She spun around, storming out of the penthouse without looking back, though her tender heart screamed to stay, to understand. Rain began to fall as she stepped onto the street, cold droplets soaking through her thin coat. Lila walked aimlessly, desperate to forget Oliver's icy voice, but she couldn't. Something felt off. He wasn't cruel, not after the times he'd protected her, the times he'd looked at her like she was the only light in his world. She sank onto a park bench, pulling the soggy, scribbled photo of Oliver from her bag. "What are you hiding?" she murmured, tears mingling with the rain. Doubt drove her to act. Back home, Lila opened her laptop and dug into Oliver's past. She was clever, quick, and resourceful. A few clicks, some old contacts from her photography days, and she reached a reporter who'd once covered Oliver. "I need information," she said over the phone, her voice resolute. "Anything you know about Oliver Blackwood? Stuff not in the papers." After a small payment from her $50,000 stash, the reporter sent her a file. Inside was a leaked medical report. Oliver Blackwood, 32, diagnosed with a rare heart condition a year ago. He was awaiting a transplant with a low survival rate. Lila read it over and over, her hands shaking, the pieces falling into place. Vanessa had known. She'd hinted at his unstable health and might have used it to manipulate him in the past. But Oliver had never told her. Anger turned to pain. He wasn't tired of her. He was pushing her away because he thought he'd die. Lila stood, not thinking twice, and bolted out into the intensifying storm. She reached his penthouse, pounding on the door until he opened it. He looked exhausted, hair damp with sweat, shirt unbuttoned, his eyes panicked when he saw her. "Lila, go home," he said, his voice hoarse, trying to shut the door. "No," she yelled, shoving it open and stepping inside. "I know, Oliver. Your heart condition. I know everything." He froze, gripping the doorframe, silent. Lila advanced, rain dripping from her hair onto the floor. "Why didn't you tell me? Why push me away?" Her voice broke, tears finally spilling over. Oliver turned, leaning against the bar, his voice trembling. "You didn't need to know." "Leave, Lila." But she didn't budge. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. "Tell me," she screamed, clutching his shirt. "I deserve to know." He met her gaze, eyes red, and his defenses crumbled. "Because I can't let you love a dying man," he said, his voice shattering like glass. "I'm sick, Lila. I don't know how long I'll live. I didn't want you to suffer when I'm gone, like you did when you lost your mom." Lila stood still, tears streaming uncontrollably. His words tore her apart, not from hurt, but from the agonizing truth. He wasn't cold. He was sacrificing himself for her. "You don't get to decide that for me," she shouted, her voice cracking. "I'm not so weak I can't handle it. Did you think I couldn't love you knowing this?" Oliver shook his head, trying to push her away again, but she clung to him, rain soaking his shirt. "I'm not leaving," she whispered, her voice choked. "You don't get to send me away." He stood there, trembling in her arms, and for a moment she thought he'd hold her back. Then he collapsed. Oliver clutched his chest, his breathing ragged, his face paling. Lila dropped to her knees beside him, panic surging. "Oliver! "Oliver, stay with me," she cried, her shaking hands pressing his chest. He didn't respond, only gasping, and she realized he was having a heart attack. Without thinking, she placed her hands on his chest, starting CPR as she'd seen on TV, counting beats, pressing down, tears falling onto his face. "Don't die! Don't leave me!" she wailed, her voice breaking apart. She kept pressing while fumbling for her phone, dialing 911, screaming into it, "Save him! Penthouse on Fifth Avenue, hurry!" The operator tried to calm her, but she barely heard. Everything blurred in the rain and fear. The ambulance arrived after minutes that felt like centuries, paramedics rushing in, pushing her aside to take over. Lila stood there, hands stained with blood from a small scratch on his arm, watching them load him onto a stretcher and take him away. She followed, climbing into the ambulance, heedless of the rain drenching her. In the hospital waiting room, she curled up on a chair, trembling hands clutching Oliver's sodden, scribbled photo, now smeared beyond recognition. She stared at it, whispering, "You can't die. You can't." Rain pounded the windows, and Lila sat there, her heart a chaotic mess, wondering if she'd lost him already, or if there was still a chance to save what she hadn't yet confessed, that she loved him, truly loved him. Chapter 5, The Fight for Love. The hospital hallway was frigid, the white lights flickering overhead like feeble heartbeats. Lila Carter sat huddled on a hard plastic chair, clutching the scribbled photo of Oliver, now crumpled, its edges soggy from the rain of the earlier storm. The sharp scent of antiseptic stung her nose, blending with the steady patter of rain against the windows, a mournful melody without end. She still wore her thin, soaked coat, her reddish-brown hair plastered to her forehead, her hands trembling uncontrollably. More than 3 hours had passed since Oliver was rushed into the emergency room after his sudden heart attack in the penthouse. The doctors said it was acute heart failure, a result of the rare heart condition she just uncovered through leaked documents. Lila didn't know if he was still alive, but in her mind a faint, quivering voice kept repeating, "You can't die. You can't." She was sharp, smart enough to grasp that Oliver's chances hung by a thread as thin as a blade's edge. But her tender, sentimental heart, the one that had shattered when her mother died in a hospital room, much like this, refused to accept that truth. She traced a scribble on the photo, her shaky fingers grasping for something to hold on to. But the lines were jagged, broken, mirroring the heartbeat she'd tried to force back with her own hands. Her tears had dried up during the ambulance ride. Now only emptiness and a choking fear gripped her chest. "You have to live," she whispered, her voice hoarse, a plea cast into the void. But deep down she was terrified. Terrified he'd abandoned her, just as her mother had, leaving her with a wordless loneliness. The emergency room doors swung open, and Lila shot to her feet, her heart pounding as if it might burst from her chest. A doctor emerged, mask pulled down, his face weary, but not hopeless. "How is he?" she asked, her voice urgent, her grip tightening on the photo until its edges tore further. The doctor sighed, his eyes grave. "He made it through the emergency surgery, but he's still critical. We've stabilized him temporarily with a machine, but his heart is too weak. He needs a transplant, and right now, we don't have a donor heart." Lila nodded, her mind reeling as it processed the information, but her heart sank like a stone into an abyss. She pictured Oliver lying there, tethered to machines, his life dangling between existence and oblivion. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice resolute, though inside she was screaming to flee from this reality. The doctor hesitated, taking in her red-rimmed eyes and pale face, then nodded. "Just a few minutes. He's not awake." The recovery room was dim under the cold white lights, the faint bip-bip of the heart monitor steady but frail, a reminder that Oliver wasn't safe yet. He lay there, eyes closed, skin so pale it was nearly translucent, surrounded by a web of IV lines and breathing tubes. Lila approached, her hand gripping the metal bedrail, its chill biting into her palm. Seeing him like this, fragile, breakable, stripped of the cold, powerful Oliver Blackwood she knew, her chest tightened, tears spilling over uncontrollably. She sank into the chair beside him, her trembling hand brushing his icy one. Fingers that had once rested on her waist now limp as wood. "You can't give up," she whispered, her voice choking, tears dripping onto his hand. "I'm here. Do you hear me?" A soft sound at the door jolted her, and she turned. A young woman about 25 stepped in, short brown hair, gray eyes like Oliver's but softer, shadowed with sorrow. "Who are you?" Lila asked, her tone wary, her hand still clutching Oliver's, as if letting go would make him vanish. The woman offered a sad smile, stepping closer. "I'm Clara, Oliver's sister. You're Lila, right?" Lila blinked, stunned, her mind spinning. Oliver had never mentioned family. She'd assumed he was alone after his orphanage years. Clara sat across from her eyes fixed on her brother with deep pain. "I heard from the doctors that you saved him, gave him CPR before the ambulance arrived." "Thank you," she said, her voice warm but shaky. Lila shrugged, trying to stay tough, but her voice came out rough. "I didn't think, I just did it." Clara nodded, then continued, her tone sinking into memory. "He's always been like this, pushing people away to protect them. After our parents died in a car accident, he took care of me, did everything to keep me going. But when I was old enough, he left. He said he didn't want me relying on him because he was afraid he'd disappear one day and leave me hurting." Lila listened, each word from Clara slicing deeper into her heart. She looked at Oliver, imagining him as a child, thin, gray eyes full of fear, holding his sister in the cold orphanage room, sacrificing himself to shield others from pain. "Because of his heart?" she asked, her voice trembling. Clara nodded, eyes welling up. "He found out a year ago. Since then, he's kept everyone at a distance, even me. I guess he did the same to you because he didn't want you to suffer like I did when we lost our parents." Lila bit her lip, her grip on Oliver's hand tightening until her knuckles whitened. She understood. He hadn't pushed her away because he didn't care, but because he cared too much, enough to destroy himself so she wouldn't hurt. But that understanding didn't ease her pain. It only fueled her resolve. "He's wrong," she said, her voice firm despite the tears rolling down her cheeks. "I'm not that fragile. I can handle it." Clara met her gaze, a faint smile breaking through, then left, leaving Lila alone with Oliver in the quiet room. She pulled her camera from her bag, the old Nikon her mother had left her, and began snapping photos of him. The rare moments when his eyes fluttered open, his lips twitching into a weak smile amid his haze, she captured them all. "What are you doing?" he rasped, his voice so faint she had to lean close, her ear near his lips to hear. "Saving memories," she replied, a teasing lilt in her voice despite the ache in her chest. "So if you dare die, I'll have proof you smiled at me." Oliver gave a soft laugh, then coughed, his hand pressing his chest, his breaths uneven. Lila set the camera aside, taking his hand, her eyes fierce with determination. "You have to fight, Oliver. I'm not here for your money or your lies. I'm here for you." Oliver turned his face away, his voice heavy with guilt. "I'll only hurt you." "I'm not worth it, Lila." She gripped his hand harder, her voice sharp and trembling with emotion. "Don't say that. You think I don't know pain? I lost my mom. I know what it's like to lose someone I love. But I'm choosing to be here, choosing you. You don't get to push me away." He looked at her, eyes red, and for the first time she saw him cry, silent tears rolling down onto the white pillow. She bent down, wiping them away, her heart breaking but brimming with resolve. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered, stroking his hair. "You're not getting rid of me." The days that followed were a silent, grueling battle. Oliver grew more lucid, but his health flickered like a candle in the wind, brightening when he smiled at her, dimming when he coughed, and the monitor beeped erratically. Lila didn't leave the hospital, sleeping on the chair, surviving on cold coffee and stale vending machine bread. She told him stories about her mom selling paintings to raise her, the times she nearly fell into a river chasing a bird photo, the nights she cried alone after her mother's death. "You're crazy," he said, his voice weak but tinged with humor, his eyes lighting up for the first time in days. "Yeah, crazy for you," she replied, forcing a smile, though her eyes were red from exhaustion and relentless worry. One night, as Oliver slept, Lila sat beside him, pulling out a photo she'd taken of him in the hospital. Eyes closed, face peaceful amid the tangle of tubes. She scribbled on the corner, a small heart, a few random curves, a silent prayer. Her hands shook as she drew, the fear of losing him surging like a tidal wave. She remembered her mom, pale on a hospital bed, her last smile for Lila before she slipped away. "No," she whispered, tears splashing onto the photo. "You can't end up like her. You have to stay." That photo, she didn't know then, would later become their love's emblem. But now it was her way of anchoring him to her world. Oliver woke the next morning, frail but clearer-headed. He took her hand, his once cold fingers now faintly warm. "Why don't you leave?" he asked, his voice rough, eyes searching hers with doubt and pain. "You know I can't promise anything." Lila looked at him, her eyes glistening, her heart torn between fear and fierce love. "Because I love you," she said, voicing it for the first time, her tone shaky but certain. "I've loved you since that first night, when you leaned close at the bar, when I felt your heartbeat stumble and didn't know why. I don't care if you're sick. I just need you here." Oliver fell silent, then pulled her into his arms, his trembling grip weak but desperate. "I love you too," he whispered, his voice breaking like shattered glass. "From the moment you walked into my life, with that cheap dress and the truest smile I've ever seen. But I'm scared of dragging you into my death. Scared you'll cry like I did when I lost everything." Lila held him tighter, tears soaking his hospital gown, her heart aching yet ablaze with determination. "I'm not afraid," she said, her voice choked. "I'm only afraid of losing you. So you have to live. For me." Lila's persistence began to crack Oliver's walls. He started fighting, not just for himself, but for her. He ate a little of the porridge she brought, though only a few spoonfuls, and let her tell stories, even as his eyes drooped from fatigue. Each time he opened them to look at her, she saw a tiny spark of hope in those gray depths. She didn't sleep, didn't leave, terrified that if she did, he'd slip away. Then one afternoon, the doctor burst in, his voice bright, cutting through the steady hum of the heart monitor. "We have a donor heart," he said, eyes alight. "If he agrees, we'll operate now." Oliver looked at Lila, fear in his gaze. Not of death, but of failing, of leaving her with pain. "What if I don't make it?" he asked, his voice quivering, his hand gripping hers. Lila held his hand, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down. "You will. You're stronger than you think, and I'm here with you. You're not alone." She told him about her mom, how she'd fought cancer to the end, even though she didn't win. "She never gave up," she said, her voice breaking. "She smiled at me until the last second. You have to do that too. Smile for me, live for me." Oliver nodded, tears rolling down his cheeks. But this time they were tears of hope, of surrender to her love. "I'll try," he whispered. "For you." Before the surgery in the prep room, Oliver lay on the stretcher, his hand clinging to Lila as though he was too weak to hold tight. "If I live," he whispered, his voice faint but resolute, "I'm yours." Lila leaned down, kissing him fiercely, her lips trembling but determined, tears falling onto his face. "You have to live," she said, her voice breaking like a plea. "I won't accept anything else." Oliver gave a weak smile, his gray eyes gleaming one last time before the nurses wheeled him into surgery. Lila stood outside, clutching the scribbled photo, her heart pounding with suffocating worry and burning hope. She waited 8 hours in the waiting room, sleepless, foodless, staring at the clock, her hands scribbling lines on a scrap of paper. Each stroke a prayer, a thread of hope. She thought of her mom, of Oliver, of the times he'd smiled at her, and she feared all of it might vanish like a dream. When the doctor emerged, smiling, she leapt up, her heart hammering. "He made it," the doctor said, his voice relieved. "The surgery was a success." Lila broke down, unable to hold back, tears pouring like rain, a mix of agony and joy. She rushed into the recovery room, seeing Oliver there, breathing steadily, his face still pale but alive. She took his hand, her other clutching the scribbled photo, and whispered, You're mine now. In her heart, fragility, determination, and worry melded into one. She'd fought, and now she knew. So had he. Chapter 6. Redemption and Forever. Soft white light filtered through the thin curtains of the recovery room window, casting a gentle glow on the pale but alive face of Oliver Blackwood. He opened his eyes slowly, as if pulling himself from a long nightmare steeped in darkness and pain. The steady bip-bip of the heart monitor sounded, no longer erratic as it had been in the days he teetered on the edge of life and death. He felt a warm pressure on his right hand. Lila Carter lay slumped beside the bed, her head resting on his arm, her reddish-brown hair a tangled mess obscuring her face. Her hand gripped his tightly, fingers intertwined, the bitten nails from days of worry still marked with faint red lines. Oliver managed a weak but genuine smile. The first time in months he felt a sense of relief, not just from the new heart beating in his chest, but because she was here, still here, despite his attempts to push her away. Leela jolted awake at his slight movement, her reddish-brown eyes snapping open, glistening with tears, a mix of worry and hope. "Oliver," she whispered, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep, her grip tightening as if she feared he'd vanish if she let go. He looked at her, his gray eyes now clearer, free of the fog of despair. "I'm here," he said, his voice faint but firm, each word a small promise to her. Leela burst into tears, unable to hold back, the warm, trembling drops falling onto his hand. "You scared me to death," she said, laughing through her sobs, wiping her eyes clumsily and leaving red streaks on her cheeks. "I thought you'd leave me like—" She trailed off, unable to finish, but Oliver understood, like her mother had. He pulled her hand to his cheek, feeling her warmth like a lifeline. "I promise I won't," he whispered, his voice shaky from exhaustion, but his gaze locked onto hers, as if she were the sole reason he still breathed. Recovery was a slow, fragile journey, fraught with challenges. Oliver was no longer the powerful man who'd once ruled the tech world from its peak. After the transplant, he was weakened, each breath a struggle, each step a battle against a depleted body. Some days he couldn't sit up on his own, his hands trembling as he tried to hold a glass, his eyes clouding with pain when the medication fell short. But Lila was there, every day, unwavering. She brought coffee from the shop near the hospital, coaxed him to eat even just a few spoonfuls of porridge, and teased him to keep him alert. "If you don't eat, I'll snap a photo of you in this ugly hospital gown and send it to the press," she joked, winking, her camera swaying as a playful threat. Oliver let out a dry laugh, his voice feeble. "You're ruthless." But his eyes brightened whenever she spoke, as if her presence was the small flame keeping him from the darkness he'd once drowned in. Inside Lila, every day with Oliver was an internal war. She was determined to stay, to care for him, but his fragility terrified her. Fear that the new heart might not hold, that she'd lose someone she loved again, as she'd lost her mother 8 years ago. At night while he slept, she sat by his bedside, scribbling on a scrap of paper, her hands shaking as she recalled her mother on a hospital bed, her face pale yet smiling gently until the end. "I can't lose you too," she whispered to herself, tears falling silently, though she wiped them away quickly, unwilling to let him see. She couldn't afford weakness, not now, when he needed her most. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the hospital window, bathing the room in a warm golden hue, Lila sat beside the bed, doodling on an old photo of her mother. Oliver watched her, his voice low. "Aren't you tired? Staying here all day with someone like me?" Lila paused her scribbling, looking up, her eyes serious yet shimmering with unshed tears. "Of course I'm tired," she said, a hint of humor masking her pain. "But leaving you? Never. I told you. You're mine." Oliver fell silent, then took her hand, pulling her closer, though his arm shook with the effort. "I don't deserve you," he said, his voice trembling, eyes red. "I tried to push you away, hurt you. I'm a fool, scared everything precious will leave me like my parents did." Lila moved closer, her hand gripping his tightly, her heart aching at his words. That night, As the hospital settled into stillness, Oliver bared his soul completely. He spoke of his past, his voice deep, laden with pain but brimming with honesty, as if peeling back his heart for the first time. "When my parents died, I was only 12, he said, his eyes distant, lost in memory. "A car accident. They were gone instantly, leaving me and Clara in an orphanage. I grew up terrified that everything valuable would disappear. I took care of Clara, did everything to keep her alive. But when she was old enough, I made her stand on her own, told her not to depend on me. I was afraid if I left one day, she'd be wrecked, like I was when I lost them. I didn't want anyone to hurt because of me." Lila listened, her hand squeezing his until her nails dug into his skin, tears falling silently as she pictured young Oliver, thin gray eyes full of fear, holding his sister in the cold orphanage, bearing his pain alone to protect others. "Then Vanessa," he went on, his voice bitter with hurt. "I loved her, Lila. I proposed to her 3 years ago. I thought she was someone I could trust, but right before the wedding, I caught her with her manager. She laughed in my face when I confronted her, said I was too rigid, too dull. I called it off right then, but after that, I didn't trust anyone. I thought love was just something people used to exploit me, to cut me deeper." He paused, his eyes red, his breathing labored as if each word stabbed him anew. "Until I met you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You walked into my life with that cheap dress and the truest smile I'd ever seen, and I was scared, scared to love you, scared to lose you, scared you'd hurt because of me." Leela leaned down, kissing his forehead, her tears falling into his hair, warm and trembling. "I'm not Vanessa," she whispered, her voice shaky but resolute. "I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here because I love you. Love you even when you're sick, even when you push me away, even when you're afraid. I'm not leaving." Oliver gazed at her, his eyes softening, and he pulled her into his arms, though his grip trembled from weakness. "You're my second chance," he said, his voice warm with emotion. "You made me believe again, in love, in myself." Lila smirked, a playful smile breaking through her tears. "And you're my first real one," she said, her voice choked. "I've never loved anyone like I love you, enough to trade everything to keep you." A month later, Oliver was discharged, though full recovery would take time. Lila brought him back to the penthouse, once a place of painful memories, now their sanctuary. She tended to him, stern yet gentle, forcing him to walk despite his grumbling, cooking soup, though she once set off the smoke alarm, the haze making them laugh through coughs. Oliver smiled more, his smiles unhidden, and he spoke of the future, something he'd never dared dream of. "I want to see your exhibition," he said one evening as they sat on the sofa, gazing at New York's twinkling skyline. "I'll fund it, so you can do what you've always wanted." Lila's eyes widened, then she hugged him tight, tears of joy streaming down. "You sure?" "It'll cost a lot." He laughed, kissing her hair, his voice deep and warm. "For you, nothing's too much." Lila's exhibition opened 3 months later in a sleek Manhattan gallery. Her photos lined the pristine white walls, from New York streets at dusk to everyday faces she'd captured on her wanderings, to private moments with Oliver, each telling a story. But the centerpiece was the scribbled photo of Oliver asleep in the hospital, eyes closed, face serene amid the tangle of tubes, its corner marked by her shaky doodles, a small heart, a few aimless curves. She'd framed it, a tiny inscription beneath, "The one who holds my heart." On opening night, Lila stood in the room, dressed in a simple yet elegant black dress, clutching her camera like a shield, her heart pounding. She scanned the crowd, a mix of pride at her realized dream, nerves from the onlookers, and a deep emotion as she thought of her mother. Stepping onto the stage, her voice trembled as she took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her eyes sweeping over strangers and familiar faces. Clara, old friends, and Oliver, standing in the corner, watching her with tender eyes. "This exhibition isn't just mine. It's my mother's dream. She taught me photography, sold paintings to raise me, and always wanted me to do what I love." "Mom," she paused, her voice breaking, tears rolling down. "Mom, I've done what you wanted. I hope you're proud." The crowd applauded, but Lila barely heard. She only saw Oliver approach, his black suit impeccably tailored, his steps steadier than ever, though still slow from his lingering recovery. He joined her on stage, taking the microphone as the clapping faded. "I'm not good with crowds," he started, his voice deep and warm. "But tonight isn't about me. It's about Lila Carter, the woman who changed my life, who saved me, not just once, but every day since I met her." Lila blushed, gripping her camera, tears streaming as she listened. Oliver turned to her, then knelt, pulling a small box from his pocket. The room fell silent, then buzzed with excitement. "Lila," he said, opening it to reveal a simple, elegant silver ring glinting under the lights. "No more pretending. Be my real one. Be my wife." Lila froze, tears pouring like a flood, but she burst into laughter, her voice choked. "God, how can you be so serious?" She dropped to her knees before him, throwing her arms around him amid roaring applause, tears soaking his shoulder. "Yes, I'll do it," she shouted, her voice breaking with joy. "But you have to promise not to make me cry anymore. Got it?" Oliver laughed, lifting her up, sliding the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking but his eyes blazing. "I promise," he said, then kissed her, a deep, warm kiss full of love, witnessed by all. But the joyful moment broke when Vanessa Reed stormed in. She pushed through the crowd, her red dress blazing like fire, her face twisted with bitterness and rage. "Oliver!" she shrieked, her shrill voice slicing through the applause. "What does she know about you? You think she stayed for love? I know you were sick. I know everything. She's just after your money like I was." The room hushed, eyes darting to Lila and Oliver, the air taut as a wire. Lila stepped forward, arms crossed, her voice cold but quivering with anger. "Run out of tricks, Vanessa?" "I stayed when he nearly died. I breathed for him when he stopped. You left him for a manager, for money and power. Who's the fake one here?" Vanessa opened her mouth to retort, her eyes flashing with malice, but Oliver raised a hand, his voice cutting like ice. "Enough, Vanessa. Get out, or security will do it for me." Vanessa sneered, her voice distorted. "You'll regret this." But as security approached, she turned, storming off in humiliation, her heels clacking a final retreat before she vanished. Her sabotage backfired, leaving her alone and defeated. Lila watched her go, then turned to Oliver, smirking. "Guess she didn't get the memo. I'm not fake anymore." The crowd laughed and Oliver pulled her close, whispering, "You never were to me." A week later, Lila and Oliver walked hand in hand through a sun-drenched park, her camera swinging at her side. Sunlight filtered through the trees, cloaking them in warm gold, a light breeze lifting her hair. Oliver was stronger now, though still needing rest, his smile no longer guarded, radiant, free, like a man who'd reclaimed himself after years of fear and isolation. Lila paused, leaning into his shoulder, gazing at the shimmering lake under the sun. She felt his warmth, the life pulsing from his new heart, and her chest swelled with a peace she'd never known. "You know," she whispered, her voice soft, eyes glistening as she recalled their journey. "I used to think I was just a fake, a contract, a role for cash. I was scared to love you, scared to lose you, scared it was all an illusion. But now I know. Loving you is the realest thing I've ever done." Oliver turned, kissing her forehead, his hand tightening around hers, his voice deep with emotion. "You brought me back, Lila. Not just this heart, but me. You're everything I was afraid to lose, and now everything I want to keep forever." They stood there, bathed in sunlight and birdsong, their happiness complete, like a perfect photo Lila no longer needed to scribble on. For this time, she knew it would never fade. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.